welcome to another episode of the CPG Guys podcast. Our hosts, Sri Rajgopalan, Peter V.S. Bond, and Brian Gildenberg explore how brands and retailers engage consumers in an increasingly digitally driven world. And now, here are the CPG Guys. Hello and welcome to the CPG Guys podcast, where we explore the omnichannel digital journey of brands and retailers. I'm your co-host, PVSB, and we recorded today's episode from sunny Miami, Florida, where the CPG Guys will be appearing on stage at WPP eCommerce, a big event hosted by the broader WPPP organization. Thanks to our good friend Jeff Malmud from Mindshare and host of the Retail Media Minute for inviting us to appear and for connecting us to today's guest. Before we get to this recorded episode, I want to remind our audience to visit cpgguys.com, where you can find links to our podcast on all the major podcast platforms, even all the minor ones too. And if you're not already doing so, please follow us on LinkedIn, where we publish new content each and every day of the week, even on the weekends. Please, of course, also subscribe to the other podcasts in our collective, including the FMCG Guys over in Europe, CPG Scoop with Risa and Jennifer, and the newest edition, CPG Guys Fast Forward, starring our very own Brian Gildenberg. And of course, we're proud to be sponsors of Next Up, formerly Network of Executive Women, whose mission it is to advance all women in business and to promote gender equality in the workplace. The digital liner notes of this episode contain hyperlinks to our site, the other collective podcast sites, our LinkedIn page, and lastly, but certainly not least, our landing page on Next Up site.
Our guest today is an expert at CPG e-commerce and shopper marketing. How do I know? Well, it's actually in his professional title, so let's hope that's the case. Since last summer, he serves as the director of e-commerce and shopper marketing at Hostess Brands, a company that claims 100% of its product portfolio is in the snacks category. If you've ever eaten a Twinkie, preferably with a straw first, you know Hostess Brands. Prior to joining Hostess Brands, he spent nearly 14 years at Tyson Foods in various shopper and e-commerce roles. He's also had a deep history in retail with work at Sears Holding, Golfsmith, and Dick's Sporting Goods. Lastly, but certainly not least, he is a bona fide Hoosier. Woo!
Absolutely.
Wow. Having graduated from Indiana University, please join me in welcoming to the podcast the Director of E-commerce and Shopper Marketing at Hostess Brands, Bret Thurston. Bret, how are you?
Thank you for asking. I'm absolutely spectacular, and here's why.
Oh,
there's no better time to be a bona fide Hoosier and a high school basketball coach. Indiana State High School Basketball Tournament will start tomorrow, and in 49 states, it may just be basketball, but in Indiana, that's where we grow it.
yes.
Later this week, we'll ring in the month of March, and all the drama will unfold across the NCAA men's and women's basketball tournaments. And finally, here we are together. I've been listening to the podcast for a while now and looking forward to chatting with you.
Wow, you came armed and ready for combat. This will be great. Well, we're going to have a little fun here. We're going to enjoy ourselves, right?
Absolutely.
All right. Well, that's great. We are so excited to have you today. I love talking to people who are particularly in perishable brands because nothing has had more of a dramatic change in its business over the last couple of years than perishable products. But before we get to the questions we prepared for the conversation, why don't you give our audience a little background on Hostess Brands?
Absolutely. So Hostess Brands is 2,800 team members, really primarily around North American operations. We have a mission to inspire moments of joy by putting heart into everything we do. That's a pretty fun mission. Like, who wouldn't want to be on that mission?
I'm in. You had me at hello.
There we go. And then our team is committed to building that premier snacking company that you were referencing. As our CEO, Andy Callahan, likes to say, he was very specific in selecting that phrasing. Building complies. We're not happy with where we are, nor will we ever be. We'll continuously improve and get where we want to go. And we'll continue to focus on improving our products, skills, and our capabilities. And that focus allows us to partner across the entire landscape. We do about $1.4 billion in revenue, so a good-sized company, but 93% of that sales comes from our two major brands, Hostess and Voortman. Hostess, as we've addressed, snacks everyone loves. The Twinkies, the Ding Dong, cupcakes, Ho-Ho's, Zingers, and donuts, America's #1 mini donut. Voortman, cookies, bakery, mainstream cookies and wafers, and #1 in zero sugar cookies and wafers. And then both Hostess and Voortman are driving category growth through innovation. Hostess baby buns, poppable snacks from Voortman mini wafers and mini cookies, and Hostess bouncers, and the latest innovation unveiled last week at CAGNY, Hostess Casbars, which under great personal risk, I've been able to secure a box of samples for the CPG Guys time.
I was clamoring to get my hands on those when I was in Boca Raton last week. They had me in deep anticipation, so I cannot wait. I'm going to have to probably, when you're not looking, I'm going to have to reach in and grab one of those. But in any event, hey, listen, I absolutely agree with you. Innovation, wow, I saw it big time in CAGNY, and I saw it particularly with the Hostess Brands presentation. So this is really exciting. All right, we're going to include in the digital liner notes of this podcast episode links to your LinkedIn profile, Hostess's LinkedIn page, and your corporate brand site. So for the 90+% of people who are listening on their mobile device, all you have to do is just switch over to the liner notes, and there are hyperlinks. You have to write anything down. You have to search into what's his name? Was it Brett? Was it Brent? Was it what was it? No, okay, no, don't worry. They're in the liner notes. Just click the hyperlink. It's that easy. It's real simple, right? All right. So I'm going to kick off with our questions. I've got some great ones for you today. Let's start with just your background, Brett. What really drew you into your career path that finds you kind of squarely in this transformational world of e-commerce and shopper marketing? I shared a bit about your background, but I'd really like to know what were some of the kind of the pivot points that led you to where you are now?
No, great points. And certainly that intro was a trip down memory lane for me. It reminded me of all the people who invested in that journey, and it really has not been much of a me journey. It's always kind of been a we journey with an alternating cast of characters who really supported me and kind of guided along that journey. You know, as you talked about, I spent 14 years in retail. That really gives you a grounding in reality. So whether you're designing a marketing campaign or a category review or things like that, you understand the reality of what's going to be executed in store. That really helped me a ton, understanding that. And then just a series of tremendous mentors that took me through retail and then led me to Sears in Chicago. And then another mentor brought me over to Sara Lee, where we were able to develop functionality at Sara Lee that then became Hillshire Brands, which really taught you how to adapt. And it was a very ever-changing environment, so much so that we were pretty successful, and Tyson purchased us. And along the way, I spent 14 years there doing category leadership, space planning, and shopper marketing. So all the functions that you would do to understand the business. And this time of my life, I really line up well with Hostess's values. It matches what I'm trying to do. And like we said earlier, inspiring moments of joy, that's a fun mission to be on. Right. So I'm looking forward to being on that mission for quite some time.
Yeah, you said a couple things there that really resonate with me about mentoring, making sure that you find people and recognize them. You know, someone gave me some really great advice a number of years ago. They said to me, "Who's on your board?" And I said, "What do you mean, who's on my board?" And they said, "Well, you have to think of yourself as a corporation. And if you're a corporation, then you have people that you trust. They are your board members. They are your advisors. They are your mentors. And those are the people you reach out to." And I think back in my career, and I can point to 4 or 5 people that I just turned to. And to some degree, after she said that to me, I felt this need to recognize. I called those 4 people and I said, "Hey, listen, I want you to know that you are on my personal board." And that actually just served to bring me closer to them. They are even more trusted advisors. Right? I love hearing about how you partnered with mentors in your career, and that's helped to advance it.
Yeah, and that's a great perspective. I love how you share that. And one thing I'll remind just for the listeners is not all mentors are above you or peers.
No.
In my previous life, some of my teammates put a tremendous investment in me and pushed me to greater heights. So if you're out there and you're a mentor, it may be peer-to-peer, it may be vertically, it may be down, but it's just great mentorship opportunities out there.
I love that. Okay. Thank you for that background on your professional experience, Brett. The pandemic had a definitive impact on omnichannel grocery, right? You've been working in perishable categories in your last 2 roles at Hostess and before that at Tyson Foods. How big was the growth of e-commerce for these categories? And where did you, when it came down in 2020, where did you start focusing on building core capabilities that didn't exist or were dramatically under-resourced?
No, that's a great question. And obviously it caught all of us by surprise. And then just depending on your insight source, 3 to 4 years of projected growth happened in about 6 months.
Yeah.
So that's really quickly understanding it. Category impact was one thing, but brand impact was another. You may have brand in-store learnings that were not directly applicable. For example, smaller brands that were able to, they were not supply constrained and able to produce, they would have a very large e-com share, which would be the inverse in-store. So how do you figure that out? So different strategies were needed in-store and online, depending on the dynamics of the brand and the category. But to answer your question, content offering and being able to deliver the best shopper experience, I think that was probably first. Multiple product images, maybe some lifestyle images below the fold copy, and then search engine optimized keywords, opportunities to really separate yourself from the competition. And then that content expansion, how were you able to deliver it across multiple platforms? I'd say probably about 3 months into it, we started looking at keyword performance. A lot of third parties were delivering back. Well, not all keyword is great or created equal, really. You may have awesome impressions, but very low conversion. So what were the brand's objectives and what were the retailer's objectives that we were trying to deliver on? And then a few more that started to come through the middle of it was bid strategy. Early on, small bids really carried the day. And your ROAS, as we're taking that metric back to the brands, it was tremendously high. It was because not a lot of competition was bidding. And so as you started to see ROAS decline, as competition went in and cost per click went up, how do you balance that, to be where you want to be and deliver the results? And then the advanced piece was really near the end, banner ads, targeting, and then in many categories, what they're trying to duplicate in-store to online is impulse purchases and building the basket. So those were the places that we really tried to focus on. But I would be honest, it was reactionary. You were reacting as capabilities came available, and you were pivoting as intelligence came available.
Yeah, there's so much packed in there. I think about the demands of the digital shelf, because before the pandemic, particularly for perishable grocery, e-commerce was a test and learn environment. It was interesting. It was fascinating. And then after the pandemic hit, everyone was getting messages from the boardroom. You need to build a strategy and you need to win on the shelf. And yet at the same time, you kind of alluded to this, supply chain constraints. A lot of manufacturers decided, am I going to continue to try and defend my shelf space? And I'm just not going to produce as much on a per item basis. And so allocation becomes an issue. Or am I going to focus my assortment on my core products and deliver those at as best I can to the full order demand from my manufacturers? And there are trade-offs that are being made. But then you think about what you need to win on the digital shelf. You said other people weren't bidding. A lot of that had to do, I think, with the fact that, again, the supply chain. If I can't even supply what I have, why am I spending money on digital advertising? But you want to win search, and now you have to come, you made reference to, you want to have images, you want to have content. I have to imagine, particularly around perishable products, suddenly user-generated content, product ratings and reviews come into play, and you're like, but I never had to have that before. And the way most shelf-stable brands get that is they use sampling communities. Well, that's not really effective or an option for perishable products. So having to deal with all this, it's coming at you like a fire hose, I've got to imagine.
It was very challenging. And in the same time, because of production, a lot of promotions were being pulled back.
Right.
So a lot of CPGs were pulling back on promotions, holding that near close to the vest or putting it back into cost improvements.
Yep.
And others were going acquisition. So you were able to acquire households by performing insertion in that space. So you're able to do that. And the other part was you had to be relatively vulnerable. Every day there would be a new expert. So you had to look who had the best content.
Yep.
And that may be a small company. And then you would kind of take that on the journey as piece of it. And then as you became more of a leader in that space, you were able to share out and do those things. But I remember taking inspiration or guidance from some small players that were just doing it better than everyone else.
Yep, absolutely. I have to imagine, just with all the different myriad of service providers coming at you with solutions, that alone can be a full-time job, just trying to manage that many players.
And you don't have the time to do a real RFP where you can vet the capabilities. And I know we get,
not when Instacart's like throwing 500% in the matter of a month. You've got to get content on their site
immediately. And then you hope that it can get out to everyone else and it's scalable. I think that was the biggest thing.
Scalable.
Understanding how you can reach your brand objectives as well as your retailers' objectives, synchronizing that to be effective.
So let's talk about the shopper marketing side of your responsibilities. What were the main areas of focus that you leaned into over the last few years to ensure omnichannel success?
Yeah. It did not really start out this way, but the real lean in was around the relationships with retailers. As retail media networks started to expand and they were starting to become more and more efficient. So what is the relationship between the merchant, the media network, and the CPG? And where we were most effective is understanding the goals and objectives of the category managers. Okay, what's your goal? How can media help you there? And then how do we sync those brand objectives and category manager objectives through the effectiveness of retail media to be there? Joint business planning was essential early on, and it really entrenched us with some key retailers. And then talking retailer strategies and linking with brand strategies to deliver on those objectives. Not all RMNs are created equal. I hate to say it, but I have to be honest.
Okay.
So evaluating and ranking based on capabilities, like, purchase history. Can you target on-site and off-site?
Yeah.
What level of customization can we build? Do we have closed-loop reporting? As a CPG, is your pricing even transparent? Like, are we paying for and know what we're getting into?
Yeah.
Brand safety standards are met through third-party tagging.
Auction types.
Right. And then measurement real time, incremental households. How can you do that? So that's what you're looking for in your best case scenario. In this time frame that you and I are discussing, everybody was pitching that, but it wasn't always an accurate assessment of the capabilities.
Yeah, that's so true. It just spins my mind when I think about, particularly around joint business planning, because I have to imagine in just the last couple of years, you've seen a dramatic shift in terms of, you mentioned this integration between the category manager, the retail media, which many times has been treated as a completely separate unit, almost alien. And now I've got to imagine you're seeing a much closer alignment, particularly with the big players, right? Where the merchant is not just calling over to the retail media network and saying, send me over your 4 slides to add to my JBP deck. It doesn't work that way anymore, does it?
It really does not. And some people are leading in that space. And think about it. You have CPGs have trade and media investments,
right? And
retailers have media, promotional planning, and distribution. So you want to tie that all together to deliver the results that both people have. Everybody wants to grow.
Right.
It's not like I don't want to invest and not grow. People want to invest and grow. So what are the best tools to leverage and do that? And at Hostess, we have tremendous distribution. So activating in that space is really our opportunity.
Do you think when you consider retail media and how manufacturers are approaching it, there are some that treat retail media as media and it's run by the marketing department. There are other ones that treat it more as a trade. There are some that have a hybrid. Does it really matter, or does there just have to be coordination for it to be successful for a manufacturer and how they're investing against that?
We prefer it to all be together, just to be honest, because really the purpose of the media could be to amplify a trade offer that's really, really good and a large investment by both the retailer and the CPG company from that part. The other piece is we may need distribution to grow so that we can then fund that increment. Everybody wants, I want incremental investment. Well, there's not an incremental Brinks truck that's going to back up. What we need to do is repurpose maybe some non-working funds. Think of slotting, ad fees, display fees, things that maybe are not working efficiently, and then deploy those to activate and really do that. So I think that's where the joint business, you can't hold on to those old thoughts. There's one bucket of funding.
Yeah.
How do we deploy those funds as a CPG, as a media network, and as a category manager to deliver the best results? And that's how we're finding success.
Yeah, so when I think about that, your ability to repurpose funds or redirect funds that you have, what's going to make that easy is your ability to demonstrate back to your leadership that you are generating measurable returns. And that's where I've got to imagine it was, to some degree, music to your ears 2 weeks ago when Unilever came out and said, in an open call to the trade, hey, love all this retail media, really need to start to think about standardized measurements, standardized solutions, so that we can all do apples to apples. Because I like to joke that my dry cleaner down the street has a bulletin board in her wall in the lobby, and that's her retail media platform. And we got to kind of get this under control, right?
And I think we've already started to see scorecarding and certain things like that. We have it on internally. We know where the more efficient spends are, and it's all around your ability to target, retarget, the effectiveness of the audience sizing, and those parts. So we know we're there, and then you can see retailers accelerating their growth into those spaces.
Right. So you alluded to this a couple of minutes ago, but I want to talk a little bit about the resource asks that are coming from your retail partners. How has that transformed over the last 3 years? Clearly, retail media is right there at the top, or pretty close to the top. Where have you found the most success in supporting these asks?
3 years ago, we talked a little bit about this, but promotions were reduced in the face of, demand constrained or unfettered demand and some constrained supply. So how can we support category managers and RMNs, to accelerate growth? Now it's more around what we were talking about, the efficiency of spend. Retailers are asking for a % of sales to be invested back into retail media. That's great. But in true partnership, hitting an investment threshold just to hit a threshold is not truly driving any growth. So how can we make it truly about growth? And that's through the efficiencies. On the CPG side, we're more than willing to invest in growth-driving tactics. And that brings us to the strategy of strategic partnerships. Should joint partners invest in slotting ad fees? We talked about that, those non-working dollars. Any fixed non-working dollars should be shifted to efficient tactics that are going to grow. Now, that's easier said than done because you hold on to what's worked for you in the past and as you develop. But, if retailers and CPGs are actually synced for growth, both sides should have asks. In order to deliver an investment threshold that drives the business, it's more than fair for retailers to ask that of CPGs. A % of dollars go into the media network. But there's no incremental Brinks truck.
Yeah. I think back to what everyone thinks about Walmart as being the lowest price. That's not actually what Sam Walton's strategy was. It was to create a relationship between suppliers and Walmart where they could reduce it to the lowest cost to serve. And that's fundamentally different than the lowest price. So focusing on the efficiencies of the relationship, I think, is critically important. The other thing you mentioned is around the ask for % of sales, right? It's not just retail media, it's increasingly data assets, right? And the challenge with that is, the 800-pound gorilla when it comes to data is our friends in Cincinnati, right? And they established a methodology that is kind of like first to market. So they've established a transparent pricing mechanism. That's something you mentioned, right? And it's based upon, here's how many categories you want to buy, here's the price. Because if Peter goes from company A to company B, he brings that along with him, and everybody knows what it is. There's no shock. You want a better price, you buy more categories. But when you ask for a percentage of sales, and the percentage you tell supplier A is different than supplier B, when Jack goes from supplier A to supplier B, that just causes a whole world of issues. So I think, to your point, asks should be fairly transparent, and they should be based on something other than every time I succeed, I have to pay more for a data asset. The other thing I'd say is the data is only as good as the use that it applies it to. And what I mean by that is, I think why Kroger's been so successful in marketing their customer data platform is that every supplier knows that you don't do business at Kroger unless you have that data, because that's how they make all their decisions. And so I say to anybody any retailer that wants to get into this space, those are kind of like the headwinds that you're working against, and you can either make it easier and play that way, or you're gonna deal with friction in the industry.
Well, absolutely, and we've talked about transparency and partnership. You have to have it. If you don't know what you're paying and what you're getting, you don't have the confidence to do that.
All right. So I want to remind our audience that today I'm speaking with Bret Thurston. He's the Director of eCommerce and Shopper Marketing at Hostess Brands. Okay. We talked about joint business planning. Have we reached a point yet in JBPs where e-commerce is a standard component of the process involving merchants? And what does best look like? You deal with a lot of different retail relationships across the grocery and mass and other customers. What to you is best in class, and are we still moving there? Is there a lot of room to go, or are we getting there?
Yeah, I think we're probably in the middle of that evolution, to be honest.
Yeah.
I think media companies are starting to see that they're having efficient tactics, but they need to partner to grow the business with the merchant, the category manager.
Right.
And the category manager, depending on the category, their size of online business could vary greatly across the board. Mm-hmm. And obviously it's still growing, but you want to address that. So it's tying that all together. But we are seeing more meetings where the media agency is bringing the category managers in to start discussing. And part of it was, again, about the acts that we were just discussing.
Right.
A CPG would need to ask for maybe incremental distribution or maybe an expansion or closing gaps. And then that volume pays for an incremental media spend, or that investment becomes more efficient. So I think CPGs are looking for ways to target new shoppers and convert for the brand and for category growth. I think grabbing market share from competitors within a category, that's a short-term strategy. And in fact, it lacks any vision whatsoever.
That's it, because someone can just turn around and do the exact same back from their perspective. That doesn't grow long-term equity. All it does is just shift share around. Right.
And it doesn't help the category manager. So I learned that by listening to my category managers. You grow the category, shoppers win, merchants win, and brands win. Yeah. So following that model, it's very easy to be transparent. And that's how we grow. Best in class, we're starting to have those conversations. Albertsons Media Collective, Ahold Delhaize, AD Retail Media, and then Kroger that you spoke of, KPM. They're in a more collaborative space, and we're able to make strategic decisions across the total investment. Where do we want to put it? And then we may make some trade-offs, but that's true joint business planning.
Exactly. Everybody gets something. Not one person gets everything they want.
And the other part is, and I'll go back to trade just a little bit.
Yeah.
Every category manager, I was with Kroger on Friday, believes that your increased media investment is coming at the expense of trade. That is not true. It's coming from inefficient other media dollars being reallocated. I think that's really the puts and takes of your retailer partnership. You have to say, hey, we are not taking or adjusting trade. We're investing in media to drive volume.
Can we say the days of the 4 FSIs to drive business are gone? That the Sunday newspaper isn't the 800-pound gorilla that it used to be.
And I think we learned that probably 3 years ago.
Yeah.
That there wasn't the movement there. And then as younger and younger demographics begin,
they don't even know what a newspaper is.
They would not ever use a print coupon. And some of them are against papers, period. So, how do you target that? But that's listening to your category managers, listening to your retailers, and talking to shoppers where they are.
All right. So to be successful in e-commerce, we mentioned this towards the beginning of our conversation, you need lots of tech stack partners, right? What are the primary functional areas where you've had to source capabilities to scale your growth? When I think of, you've probably seen that Chief MarTech landscape map and how it's evolved over a couple of years, or a couple hundred logos and 1,000, 10,000. And it's like, oh my God, I think about how high resolution graphic you need to be able to zoom in to see that one logo, right? So, how do you manage that world where the service providers are growing at seemingly an exponential rate? How do you make wise investments without having to boil the entire ocean and vet every single one of them?
Yeah, not to be repetitive, it's really a team effort. Yeah. Like your media network can help guide you. Certainly your agency partners can help guide you. Okay. And it's really what goals are you trying, to deliver on. Those partnerships, they're just critical. We should be looking 18 to 24 months down the road so we can provide solid counsel to merchants, and retail media networks. Some of the ones where we've really leaned in, and it's easy to talk about, but it's content delivery. The more automated updates for content for retailers to ingest, that's a lot easier on the retailer. It's a lot easier on the CPG.
Oh, no, you've got it. Yeah, they all have different formats. It's not like you just take an image and you email it to 20 different addresses. It doesn't work like that. There's a lot going on under the hood.
Everyone has a different naming convention.
Yes.
Everything has to be ingested. They all take content at different times.
Some take different kinds of visual content.
Some take your images from one provider and they take your content from another. So it's just a very complicated map in that space to be able to do that. But let's use content syndicators, for example. That map to success is complicated, and all providers have a POV of why they're number one. Which should a CPG should choose? Which should a retailer choose? You got to understand those objectives. And for one, this is a real example. A provider is delivering enhanced content to a retailer, but they are not the primary image and marketing content provider. So they can provide enhanced content, but the basic content of images and above and below the fold is coming from a different source. So if you were not aware of that, you could pivot and miss your brand and your retailer's objective.
And then you have different kinds of content on the page beyond just the visual imagery. User-generated content's a great example, right? Completely different provider than visual content. And you need to understand how UGC factors in to the search algorithm for SEO. Because if it is highly correlated, then suddenly that's your mechanism to make sure your product appears on page one of search results. And I had a friend of mine who once said the best place to hide a dead body on a retailer website is page 2 of search results because nobody ever goes there.
Page 2, they'll never find you.
Never find you. So you want to be on page 1 and you need to know what drives, retail media is great. It gets you at the top of the list, but what about the rest of the page, right?
And that's why the KPI is share of page 1, not share of page 2. Just to illustrate your point, there is no share of page 2.
So that is one of your. I love that. That is a very important KPI. What's your share of page 1? Okay. So I mentioned to you I was at the Consumer Analyst Group of New York conference last week where Hostess Brands presented. There were a couple of underlying themes. There's no question that innovation. I saw it everywhere. Everyone now has their restrained production capacity has been eliminated. Everybody wants to start introducing their new products. But the other theme that was very prevalent was this concept I would loosely call a return to stores. That physical retail. I don't know that it's a return to stores. In my opinion, 89% of the volume was always in stores. It just wasn't as sexy as talking about e-commerce and what have you. So I'd love to know from you, what are your thoughts on helping Hostess Brands bridge the gap between physical and digital and make sure consumers get the most meaningful, not like the perfect, but the most meaningful experience relative to Hostess Brands?
Yeah, so Hostess Brands is unique because we have a 92% brand awareness. So I say that because I'm very proud of it.
Yeah.
But in full ownership, we have less than 40% top of mind awareness. So what we need to do is simply communicate with shoppers wherever they may be. That is a tall ask, right? But whether they're online or in store, we want to grow the category and the brand by communicating. Tomorrow with WPP, we'll be discussing the evolution of consumer shopping, and really it's the shortening of the shopper journey.
Yeah.
From top of awareness to conversion at the bottom. So my thoughts on that space is anywhere a snacking occasion is purchased, it could be C-store, it could be at Farm and Fleet, Dollar, Drug, Club, Grocery, and Mass. Hostess wants to offer an excellent shopping experience. Offer those moments of joy, basic and enhanced content, any social messaging we can get out there, but we want to offer that. And at a minimum, brands want to offer shoppers the same level of experience, whether it be online or in store. Leading brands and retailer partnerships need to be there to deliver the best experience so that they become loyal shoppers to the brand and to that retailer. And expanding the importance of impulse purchases and emerging capabilities, things that are coming online and changing all the time. Retailers are placing an increased priority around online grocery and order pickup. So they're seeing a hybridization of that. We're very concerned about e-com. We want to grow our in-store sales, but in those partnerships and those JBP meetings, this has come up multiple times. We're trying to drive online grocery order and pickup.
Yeah, I think what I see particularly like what Target's been doing with their Starbucks coffee, adding that to the pickup capability, I think that is the canary in the coal mine. I think that retailers are going to figure out how to append convenience and impulse purchase into the pickup. And that's a really great example of of something ingenious, like you want to get your coffee while you pull up. Well, you know what? They've got that little tray. They can probably bring a couple other items and quickly add that on and drive it. And the other great thing about that, I mean, the more reasons you can give people to do pickup, it has tremendous value. Why? Because I think the stat that I saw Nielsen said is that like over 30% of people who come to a store to do a click and collect end up going into the store and doing an actual transaction above and beyond. So anything you can do to increase the experience, to capture that sale around impulse, I can see why that's very attractive to your business.
Yeah, absolutely. And we spoke a little bit about Instacart, but in the e-com space, what unlocks impulse and basket building? We're not there. That's probably the next big leap that it's going to take. And so getting shoppers in the store helps. And then the other part, that's why they have attribution windows, because you may have clicked and added it on the list, but you may have gone back in that attribution window to make that purchase in store. So it's really a combination of in-store and e-com. And although it may happen on one platform, you may be making those purchases later down the road.
Having that closed loop attribution is critically important. And I think where e-commerce to some degree has fallen short for a lot of manufacturers, particularly ones that are doing shoppable media, is it gets it into the basket, but it doesn't give you that closed loop understanding. So the value of being able to do retargeting of abandoned baskets, if you have that knowledge and you understand that they abandoned the basket here, but they bought it in store, but I don't need to waste my time on it.
You don't need to
right? It's all good.
And I think one more thing I wanted that you talked about earlier, this is a great opportunity when you talked about trusting your providers and who you would select.
Yeah.
We saw a tremendous ROAS increase during the pandemic.
Yeah.
All they had done was change the attribution from 14 to 28 days. So, of course, ROAS exploded. So those are the things where you don't have time to vet, but you really need to be mindful about the partners you're choosing.
Yeah, that's great. All right, so let's look towards the future, shall we? What do you see the future holding, particularly for perishable products in e-commerce? What should e-commerce marketers be thinking about for tomorrow and beyond that really keeps you, I don't want to say it necessarily keeps you up at night, but it weighs heavy on you thinking about where you need to be focusing your attention?
I love the way you framed it up there at the end. Like, it can keep you up at night for two reasons. A, you could have apprehension, or you could have excitement.
Yes.
So we're going to dig into a couple there. And plus, let's wait 5 minutes and the future of e-com will be here. That's how quick it changes. The shopper journey is going to continue to shorten. Traditional top of funnel tactics, just of awareness, they're going to add shop now or just add to cart capabilities.
Like I saw a stat the other day that said 50% of fast-moving consumer goods add to basket occurs on the listing page. They don't even get to the detail page. So I can see what you're saying is that shortens the journey.
They know exactly where they're going to be. And then I think even higher up, you will start to see that showing up on your streaming service. You could put add to list now or shop now and add that. So I think that's one that keeps me awake at night from excitement, because now you're going to have those shoppers able to convert very, very quickly. I think retail media networks, we've spoken about them, at length, but they're going to continue to grow and they're going to continue to add more and more value. You have retailers moving into that space, and that's a great opportunity for brands to partner.
Sure.
Right? And we have great partnerships now, and we'll have even more in the future, but that's going to lead to more personalization. Based on your shopping behaviors, that's what you're going to see. There's good and bad that comes with that.
Sure.
You may see limited offerings, but you may see offerings that are more meaningful to you as a shopper. And then one of the things that keeps me awake at night, maybe with some apprehension, is what will the role of voice be? Siri, Alexa, Google, order managing your household and collecting your data. So it's twofold. How will that perform, in that space? And then a couple more that I'm a little excited about in perishable specifically is subscription services. Amazon does this with center of store, non-perishable, like they're crushing it. And as delivery timelines continue to shorten, how will that impact perishable foods? What about smart appliances? My appliance orders milk based on my household consumption, and orders repeat and refill based on velocity of that consumption. Like, that's fascinating. And then we talked a little about the future, but I'll throw a throwback in there. There's a dairy and beverage brand in Chicago that delivers dairy to your home, right? So I don't know how much a gallon of milk may cost. I just know it's filled every week. So what is the impact on price sensitivity if that repeat is there. So those are things that keep me up from apprehension, but also keep me up just on excitement.
Yeah, I love the replenish model. That one's particularly interesting. I look at what Albertsons has done with Replenium and built that. There's an enormous value. Like if I'm a brand marketer and I'm given the option of providing the shopper with a 5% discount in exchange for taking them out of the buying cycle, I think I'd bet on that all day long and I'd fund that out of my brand budget. I wouldn't go to the account person calling on Albertsons and say, you need to fund that out of your budget. I would fund that all day long because I don't have to market to that person once. Or the opt-out rate of subscribing savings like infinitesimally small.
Hardly any whatsoever. And now you've built a loyal retailer customer, a loyal category, and a loyal brand. And you're there. And you can then go acquire new households that cause all the boats to rise with that time. It's just fascinating.
That's great. Hey, I want to remind our audience, please go and visit cpgguys.com. You can find all of our content. We organize our episodes in different topic categories like retail media, like data and analytics, like DEI, whatever it is. It's all there. You can find the episodes that are particularly relevant to your interest, but you may find some new ones that you hadn't thought about. So please do. We've got 260 plus episodes there. So it can keep you busy for quite a long time. So don't worry. It'll take you a while to catch up, but please do check out our content there. And hey, if you think that you have some thought leadership to contribute to our community and the conversation we've got going on, drop us a line at contact@cpgguys.com. And maybe you can come on the podcast because we want this to be a community conversation. That's how we get this going. This is what makes it absolutely so interesting. And of course, we want to thank you to the now 20,000 followers on LinkedIn. We are so grateful. It's all organic. There are no paid followers. We don't give away or do anything like that. We're very grateful that so many people find value in this podcast. I love going to trade shows and running into people and just getting random messages. So if you want to reach out to me, absolutely. See me on an airplane, come on over and say hi. I'm always willing to do that. I know Sheree and Brian are as well. Hey, Brett, I want to thank you so much for taking time out of WPP. We got a really big event coming up here, don't we?
Very exciting. Looking forward to it.
Yeah, so WPP Commerce is a big event. We've got a day and a half of presentations. I'm on stage on Wednesday morning with my colleague Brian Gildenberg from the CPG Guys. There are a whole bunch of other people. It's going to be, I think, a really dynamic opportunity to exchange ideas with people in our industry. We're kind of like a small group, but we're a really tight-knit group, right?
Yeah, and very open to sharing. I think that's the thing. I would advocate to reach out to you to be on the podcast. A wonderful experience, but also when I've had questions, I can go back and look at that content and see how others answer.
Yeah.
And I've done that. So I would advocate, if you have something to add or to share, please reach out and be on the podcast. It's great.
All right. Well, thank you so much for sharing your thoughts and ideas. It was a lively conversation. It's so great to hear about how a tremendously iconic perishable group of brands like Hostess and Voortman in its entirety as Hostess Brands is tackling this omnichannel world. So exciting. And to our audience, thanks for joining us. We look forward to speaking with you on the next episode of the CPG Guys podcast. Goodbye.
The content in this podcast episode is provided for general informational purposes only. By listening to our episode, you understand that no information contained in this episode should be construed as advice from CPG Guys LLC or the individual author, hosts, or guests, nor is it intended to be a substitute for research on any subject matter. Reference to any specific product or entity does not constitute an endorsement or recommendation by CPG Guys LLC. The views expressed by guests are their own, and their appearance on the program does not imply an endorsement of them or any entity they represent. The views expressed by CPG Guys LLC do not represent the views of their employers or the entity they represent. CPG Guys LLC expressly disclaims any and all liability or responsibility for any direct, indirect, incidental, special, consequential,
or other damages arising out of any individual's use of, reference to, or inability to use this podcast or the information we present in this podcast.